By the first century of the first millennium, the old views on sexuality began to shift dramatically with the rise of Christianity. The narratives of Adam and Eve emerged as central to understanding human relationships, framing them as the original couple, complete with their flaws. This new religious perspective fundamentally altered how people perceived the natural order of the world, where any disruption to this order was deemed unnatural and contrary to God's will. As Christianity spread, so did its teachings on sexuality. Monogamy and sexual fidelity became paramount, while any sexual relations outside of marriage were labeled as fornication. The Bible served as a moral compass for Christians, with books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy outlining permissible and forbidden sexual acts. The Jews referred to these texts as the Torah, or teaching, and early church fathers sought to adapt these guidelines to establish a code of licit sexual behavior. Chastity became the ideal state, with figures like St. Paul advocating for abstinence. In 1 Corinthians 7:1, he famously advised,
"It is good for a man not to touch a woman,"
suggesting that complete sexual abstinence was preferable. Martyrs of chastity, such as Saint Juliana of Nicomedia, exemplified the extreme measures to which some would go to uphold these ideals. Her story, filled with gruesome trials, illustrated the belief that remaining a virgin was far superior to marriage. Such narratives became part of a masochistic hagiography, celebrating the suffering of holy women in their quest to retain their virginity. Marriage was seen as a necessary compromise, with sexual relations permitted only for procreation within heterosexual unions. St. Paul suggested that those unable to control their desires should marry, emphasizing that it was better to marry than to burn with lust. The Church established that sexual activity should be confined to penetrative intercourse, typically in the missionary position, with fidelity to one's spouse being essential. Men were encouraged to control their sexual appetites, focusing instead on raising children rather than seeking fleeting pleasures. St. Augustine criticized male infidelities, arguing that marriage should encompass more than just procreation. It should also foster companionship between the sexes. His own life experience, having lived with a concubine for 13 years, informed his views on the importance of friendship in marriage. Conversely, St. Jerome portrayed women as insatiable temptresses, warning that their desires could lead men astray. He cautioned that women's love was inherently dangerous, perpetuating a view of women as threats to male rationality. By the 6th century, penitentials emerged as guides for addressing sins and assigning penances. Initially intended for monastic leaders, these texts soon became tools for local priests. The most notable was the Penitential of the Bishop of Worms, which categorized sins into natural and unnatural. However, it was Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century who significantly influenced Christian sexual morality. He argued that all goodness stemmed from nature and reason, establishing a hierarchy where men were at the top and women were secondary. He categorized sexual acts based on their potential for procreation, deeming many forms of sexual expression, including oral and anal sex, as immoral even if consensual within marriage. Aquinas' strict definitions of licit and illicit sexual behavior laid the groundwork for centuries of Christian sexual ethics. He believed that any sexual activity outside of penile vaginal penetration was not only sinful, but could be considered worse than rape if it did not lead to conception. This rigid framework imposed by the Church stifled many aspects of sexual expression, shaping attitudes towards sexuality for generations. The evolution of sexual morality within early Christianity marked a profound shift in societal attitudes towards sex. From the teachings of the Church Fathers to the rigid moral codes established by figures like Aquinas, the influence of Christianity on sexual ethics cannot be overstated. These early doctrines set the stage for how sexuality would be perceived and regulated in Western culture for centuries to come, intertwining morality with the sacred and forever altering the landscape of human relationships.